Okay, so we're actually, you know what? I'll share the source sheet that I have, but you guys also have it, and we're just using that because I think it's a little bit faster. Um, but if you have a Gemara, that's also good. Uh, and well, if you notice that I wrote in the title here three things: juice that oozes, juice squeezed to improve the flavor of the fruit, and juice squeezed into food. In other words, there's really a third thing, which is just mamish juicing things to drink. But we have to make a distinction. There's such a thing as, there's the beginning we're talking in the Gemara is going to start off talking about juice that oozes. And what is that? Can somebody tell, what am I talking about there? What's the content? What's the case that we're talking about? Why are they oozing, or what's going on?
Rabbi Nachum, is it not that we're talking about fruit that the juices are sort of I guess you're using the word oozing of their own accord, either maybe you've like already cut a fruit in half and it's sort of the juice is dripping, but no one is doing any expressing or squeezing. It's just sort of its own accord.
Right. Well, we have this idea of hichnisan. Hichnisan. What I wanted to say is that the juices that ooze, we're talking about like a person who like filled up a barrel with grapes, let's say, and the sheer weight of the grapes causes a certain amount of juice to come out in the barrel. That's what we're talking about. That juice that sort of comes out just on its own, can you drink it, even though you didn't do anything? Or it'd be harder to imagine like cantaloupe, but I guess if you had like cantaloupes in a jar, also maybe some juice would get out. Or rimonim. That's talking about the oozing. That it's sort of stocked up in a large barrel or in a large bucket or some kind of large container, and the pressure is causing it to ooze. There's a second thing where we'll talk about juice squeezed to improve the fruit. That means like, well, can anybody give an example from what would you think of an example of that is? It's hard to imagine a fruit that you'd squeeze out the juice to improve the juice, to improve the food, the fruit itself, but maybe a vegetable you can think of. What would it be?
Eggplant is one. You squeeze the moisture out of the
Oh,
eggplant. Cook it better.
perfect eggplant, because there's the moisture has like that has poisons in it. Or let's say a pickle, maybe. A pickle is like too sour. You might want to squeeze it out and get some of the vinegar out. And then the third thing is juice squeezed into foods. So what's the classic example of that?
Lemon.
Right. If you're making, let's say, salad and you want lemon juice on it, so you can squeeze it into the salad. Or fish. And the lemon is lemon is a special din of a lemon, but you couldn't do that, let's say, with grapes. You couldn't squeeze grapes into your salad to have a little grape flavor into your salad. Could do with lemons. Okay, that's just introduction. Let's hit the road or hit the material. So we have this Mishnah here. I just highlighted the part that I'm interested in, which says "Ein sochatin et perot lahotzi mehen mashkin," which, by the way, implies that you could sochet it for some other purpose, but you can't sochet it, can't squeeze it to get out the mashkin. But if they came out by themselves, then they're also asur. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im le ochlin, if it was for food, ayotzem mutar. So we'll have to see, what does it mean, im le ochlin? What does that mean, im le ochlin? Hayotze mehen mutar. If it came out by itself and it's for food. So we'll see in the Gemara. Well, anybody remember, what does it mean, im le ochlin? What does that mean, im le ochlin? Like, the way you might want to read it is you're chopping up vegetables for food, but that's not the way I want to read it. Any other ideas? Back to what I said before. About Hichnisan.
If you're cutting the food for the food, and if incidentally some of the juice comes out.
Yeah, that's one way of understanding, but that's not the right way, I don't think. I want another way of looking at it.
Could
Yeah,
be that
Matt.
it improves it's better for the food if it doesn't have that juice. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Another idea. Took me a while to really get this clear. But what Rav Yehuda is saying is, im lo'ochlin. In other words, if you put them in the barrel because you want to eat them as grapes or as pomegranates, then whatever came out was not your intention. It's forbidden. But im lemashkin, if you even before Shabbat, you put them in the barrel because you were intending to use those grapes for mashkin. You didn't take, or your the rimonim, you were planning on making rimonim juice. And now comes out juice. So then it's us. I mean, by extension, you could talk about chopping of vegetables, but that's like more of a modern extrapolation to be more relevant. But that's not what the mission is talking about. The mission is talking about hichnisan le'ochlin. You brought them into your house for the purpose of eating. Okay. Here, Joel, why don't you read the first bit of this Gemara here that I have? It's actually, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just finding my Gemara here. Okay. Mar Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel. Modeh haya Rabbi Yehuda lachachamim bezeitim v'anavim. So Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Chachamim actually when it comes to olives and grapes, which are going to be our paradigmatic things that are used for juice. I'd say something like that, or the things that are almost everyone uses for juice in the world, something to that extent. All right. So of course, what does he agree on is an interesting question, but it seems to be he agrees that even if you were reserved for ochlin, but if something comes out from them, it is asur.
Exactly. You brought them in. You brought in these grapes or olives because you wanted to eat them, and then comes out. So Rabbi Yehuda, you might have said, Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Mutter. He says, no.
So my timer. So what's the reason? Kivan ninhu yahiv date. Right? Because these things are generally made for squeezing into juice, you're gonna put your mind to it essentially that you wanted them in order to juice them.
And you might come to actually squeeze them.
Exactly.
Rashi says.
Yeah.
Now we can skip to the next yellow piece.
What's the next yellow piece?
Moda haya Rabbi Yehuda lechachamim.
Okay. I just want to find that. This is Amar Rabba.
Yeah, Amar Rabba, Amar Rav
Yehuda. Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Moda haya Rabbi Yehuda lechachamim bezeitim v'anavim umodim chachamim Rabbi Yehuda bishar perot. All right, so the Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Chachamim about olives and grapes, that even if you put them for ochel and fruit and juice comes out, you're allowed to eat, it's mutar. But the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Yehuda for all other fruit, that if you've collected it just for the ochel, then he agrees that it's asur, and they agree it's mutar if it's any other kind of fruit. So
right, Bishar Yerakot, they agree with Rabbi Yehuda that it depends on why you put them in the barrel in the first place. If you were trying to store them up for food, then any juice that comes out you could have, because we're not worried that you're going to now go and squeeze them because they're after all normally eaten and you're trying to eat them. But grapes, if they're normally squeezed, like most grapes are for wine, so you wanted to eat them. That's not going to. We're still worried you're going to change your mind about them. So it seems so far like the Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim agree about everything.
Yeah,
if it's grapes and olives, then what comes out of itself is usher. And if it's other fruits, then what comes out is mutter. As long as it was that you didn't intend to squeeze them, or the other fruits. And so, okay. And we still haven't seen any heter about squeezing things for the purpose of juice. We're just talking about storing them up and juice comes out. Anyway, so read the next part of the Gemara. Amarle Rabbi Yirmiyah.
Amarle Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Abba. Elba my place. What's the disagreement? Amarle, I think it's lechi tishkach, like when you go find an answer, essentially, right? Is what
Yeah,
he's saying.
go. It's like Zil Gemur. You go
Yeah,
before you ask me. Go check it out.
yeah. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, mistabra betutim v'rimonim plige. So it must be that strawberries and pomegranates, that's the word, is what they're
It's not
disagreeing.
strawberries
Oh, it's not. What is
because they didn't really have the strawberries are grow in the Swiss Alps. I don't. They don't really. They didn't have so much strawberries, and they didn't certainly. It's really mulberries.
Oh, okay. So
Because
I only
in
know
modern
mulberries,
Hebrew, at least, you call it tut eitz,
so
mulberry.
I only know mulberries from what the song. So that's
Whatever.
but,
It's some kind of fruit that makes easily juice, just
okay.
like rimonim.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's okay. So so they disagree about, we'll call them so mulberries and pomegranates. They disagree about the Tanya. So we have a break about this. Zaytim shemashach mehem
Well, no,
shemen.
actually, skip all that.
Oh,
Okay.
skip that. Okay, where do you want me to go to?
Oh, actually, I do want this one part here. Here it says where I got this idea of a hichnisan. You see here, if you skip a little bit, hichnisan leochlin.
Mm-hmm. I had mehem.
Maybe you could read. I read the bright. I take it back. Read the bright.
I read the bright. Okay, here we go. I gotta find it again. In my Gemara. Abetimer Manim Plige de Tanya. Zaytim Shemashach Men Shemen, Vanim Shemashach Mem Yain, Vichnisan, Bain Laocha, Bain Lamashkin, Hayat Semehem Asur. Okay,
Right, so here you see clearly that that we're talking about hichnisan leochlin. When it says leochlin in the Mishnah, it really meant hichnisan leochlin. As you put them into the barrel, you brought them into the hichnisan. It means really you brought them into your storage room or your house, and you in a barrel for the purpose of eating. Right. It's not talking about why you're chopping them. Right. Okay.
Yeah, to team shemashach man mayim, v'rumanim shemashach man yain. So mayin there, of course, meaning some sort of juice, really. I think. Vichnisan leochlim hayat semehem mutar. If you brought them in, you gathered them together. I would say actually for food, what comes out of them is mutar. Lemashkin vilistam hayat semehem asur. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. All right. So, but one
vilistam.
Yeah.
Does that mean
this is the default case, or for mashkim? Rabbi Yehuda says it's asur.
Right. So in other words, you have to be explicitly brought them in for food. Only then what comes out is mutter in these rimonim. Okay.
So, and the Chachamim say it doesn't matter why you collected them together, whatever comes out of them is forbidden in the cases of rimonim and tutim. So
right. Okay. So we have basically they agree about shar yirakot, that what comes out if you brought them in for food is mutter, and they agree about grapes and olives that what comes out of them is usher even if you brought them in for food. And the only argument is about these middle category of things that, let's quantify this middle category. It's things that are you are often made for juice, but are not primarily made for juice, let's say, or not, substantively made for juice. Great. We have to say a few words about there's a few opinions in the, like the Gaonim say that what's special about yayin and olives is that it's like a tremendous improvement. Which is more valuable, a liter of grapes or a liter of wine? Which is more valuable, a liter of olives or a liter of olive oil? So those are like not just improvements. There's a couple things about them. The Gaonim say it's that they are mentioned in the Torah as mashkin. The Torah doesn't mention rimonim juice or tut juice, but it mentions wine and it mentions olive oil. So they're clearly like singled out vegetables, singled out liquids, and also very important point they don't say, but some of the Rishonim say is that you store it. In other words, once it's in its form of wine or olive oil, you can store it for a long time. But rimon juice probably going to get ruined. Orange juice we store, but we have to keep it pasteurized and refrigerated, and you can't really store orange juice. But olive oil and wine are these things that are storable. So I'm just trying to explain why they might be. There's several different reasons why we might say they're more strict. not only more strict, maybe deraita. The Rambam holds that they're deraita, whereas the other things are not deraita. And the Rif also. So because they're stored like that, they're mentioned in the Torah, and it's an improvement. 3 different kind of reasons. Okay. Now the Gemara goes on. I skipped a little bit. Ashkechan Rabbi Yehuda.
I'm going to read from your sheet now because then I have to find back where it is. Ashkechan Rabbi Yehuda de Modeh LeRabbanan b'Zeitim v'Anavim. So we found a source that has Rabbi Yehuda's agrees with the rabbis in cases of olives and grapes. Rabbanan de Modeh Rabbi Yehuda b'Shar Perot Milan. So give us a source that the rabbis agree with Rabbi Yehuda for other fruit, right? So now we have this Paita, the Tanya Sochtim, I think it's Fegaim, which I think are prunes, or plums probably, right? According to Rashi. Uve Prishim, Uve Uz Radin, Avalo Barimonim. So you're allowed to, we'll see about Lechat Chila and B'diavad and all this stuff here, but that
you're allowed to squeeze.
Yeah, squeeze. So
you're allowed to squeeze for the purpose of juice, presumably. Well, we'll see.
But
that's a big question. You're allowed to squeeze these figain. Oh, you think it's figs, figain? Oh no, you said it was.
Rashi. I thought Rashi said prunes, right?
Prunes. Okay.
Yeah, which I assume is plums.
Prishin is, I think. What is prishin? It's like an apple or maybe a pear.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you what Rashi says in La'az, but
Uzradin, these other fruits.
I found like quinces and crab apples were, but I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, I think it's like quinces. Yeah.
Quince would work with the Rashi. That's what he has in La'az. Yeah. So he has korms or kormis for uzdradim, but whatever that is. So
good. It's interesting. In modern Hebrew, it's a different word, but okay. Anyway, these are kind of like apples or crab apples or something. Avalo rimonim.
Yeah. So
you can squeeze these other. First of all, we see in this Braita that there's a distinction. It's not, the world is not made up of 2 things. It's not just, it's not just the category of grapes and olives. It's also and the other category being all other vegetables, all other fruits. But there's a middle category here, or where we see that there are the other fruits are categorized here as Pigain, Prishin, Uzradin. Those ones you could actually even squeeze, which we were never even talking about with Rimanim. We were never saying you could squeeze Rimanim. We were just saying the juice that came out of them is forbidden. Okay. Aval, according to the Chacham.
Yeah.
Aval lo Rimonim. You can't squeeze Rimonim.
Go on. Menashe or Menashe, whatever he is, Bar Menachem, Hayu Sochtim Barimonim. So it sounds like they would squeeze Rimonim lechatchila in this.
Now, what it means is no. That's not what it means.
Oh no! Sorry, you're right. This means that they would make juice out of Rimonim
during the week. Tuesday. During the week,
yeah, on Tuesdays, yeah, something like that. So,
so we're giving a justification.
Yeah,
the reason why you can't use you can't squeeze Rimonim is because it's a thing that's done. People do squeeze them during the week. And therefore, it's like a recognized malacha because people are doing it. I'll read a little bit. Actually, wait a second. Actually, we can skip this part. Read the next dark line that I have there.
Amar Rav Nachman, halacha kishel Beit Menashe Bar Menachem.
Yes.
So Rav Nachman says the halacha is like Beit Menashe and Bar Menachem, which means that you can't squeeze Rimonim lechat chila on Shabbos because you do make juice out of them.
Exactly. It's a little bit weird. Exactly.
Yeah.
In other words, because they make this Rimonim juice, you can't do it on Shabbat. Okay. So go on. Amar le
Rava le Rav Nachman Menashe ben Menachem Tana. Who? Well, is this guy a Tana that you're quoting the halachas like him? So he sounds like he's just a guy, right? V'chitema halacha ki hai Tana desavra la kishel Menashe ben Menachem. Right, and if you want to say that maybe the halacha is like the Tana who thinks in the way that Menashe ben Menachem thinks, which is that Rimonim are usually made, are used for juice in the world, But umishum the savar Menashe ben Menachem halach k'motoi, just because he agrees with this idea of using pomegranates during the week for juice, that the halacha is like him. And then was
Right.
and
No,
then
no, but the point is, would we put his halacha in the name of Menashe ben Menachem? In other words, the key Tana, the Savar Lach,
okay,
because that Tana holds like this guy, that's why we're going to paskin like him?
yeah, that's
We're back to the same question. Who is this guy?
yeah. So Menashe ben Menachem have a Ruba Dalma. What is this like? Is he the paradigm of the world, shall we say? Right?
The majority of the world? Is he?
Yeah.
Is we're going to follow the halakha? The halakha should go by the majority.
Mm-hmm.
And now we say not that he is the majority, but the halakha follows him. Why?
Hamakayim kodsim bakerem. Rabbi Eliezer Omer kidesh v'chachamirim eno mekadesh el davar shekamohu mekayimim. So a person who has thorns, that's what they grow in their vineyard, essentially. That you are kadesh. It's in terms of
yeah. In other words, if you grow vegetables under a grapevine, then they're kidesh, and you're forbidden to eat them. Any vegetables that grow under a grapevine, even if it like you walk with a tomato plant underneath a grapevine in a pot, then you can't eat those tomatoes at least. It's kidesh. It's like kilayim. It's a mixture of different species. So what about thorns underneath your grapevine? Is that food? So he says, yeah, if you leave them there and you don't destroy them, so he says it's kidesh.
Unless it's something that people generally sustain in their vineyard, that doesn't count. So
go on.
Ve'amar Rabbi Chanina, my time into Rabbi Eliezer. So what's the reason that Rabbi Eliezer agrees that they're kidesh? Shekain be'arviyah mekaimim kotzim sadot ligmalehen, because there's in Arabia, I assume that's where that is. I'm not sure.
Arabia, like Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, exactly. They have thorn fields for their camels, right? I assume maybe to keep their camels out, or maybe they eat them. I don't know what the reason is, but
right. They since those people keep it, so you see it as food, and therefore it's kiddush. So you see kind of an example like the Menashe, that even though some place is some place is doing something, all of a sudden it becomes usher for everybody. Since those people over there keep them, then even for us it's going to be kiddush. Just like Menashe makes the Jews, and for us it's going to be kiddush. It's going to be forbidden. So now, keep going, yeah.
Mideir, yeah. The Arvaya Atra, right? So what's it? Mideir, is it Devar?
I think it's like, is this comparable?
Yeah. So
I'm just translating it loosely. Is this comparable?
Yeah.
Aravya,
the place.
Atra. That's a place.
It's just a place. But here
in our case with Menashe, it's just one guy.
Exactly.
We shouldn't care what he does. So one guy drinks free money, just going to ruin it for everybody else. We should be able to even squeeze them. Ella.
Let's see. Ella Hainu Thomas. So we got a different reason. Rav Chista. The more Rav Chista, Tradin Shesachtan Utanan B'mikveh, Poslina to Mikveh B'shinui Mara. What are Tradin? I can't remember. It's
it could be like spinach.
Okay.
It could be beets. I'm not sure.
It's beets because it changes the color of it. Makes
the mikveh. It's got to be something colorful, but that's
beets. You see the top of beet leaves looks like spinach.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Like
okay, whatever. I think I'm not sure if it's the top of the beets or the fruit. Whatever. It's some vegetable.
So if you squeeze them and you put the juice in the mikveh, right? If it changes the way the mikveh looks, doesn't look like water anymore, that's posel the mikveh.
Right.
The halav b'nei schita. What? These are nobody squeezes tradin.
Right. No, these are not fruit juice. This is not really juice. What you got out of it is not really a mashke, and therefore it should not puzzle the. If you think about this, what is he saying? He's saying only mashkim are puzzle the mikveh, and this is not a mashke.
Mhm.
You're a crazy guy who's squeezing, wheatgrass or whatever it is you're squeezing here. It's not a mashke, so why is it puzzling the mikveh?
But all right. So Ela might lachala memer. So what can you say about this cave? Why is it posted on the mikveh? Kevan the achshavinu have mashke, right? Because you make it, you consider it, you value it. I don't know, something like that.
Because you wanted to have juice.
Exactly. It
You
becomes
you
mashke.
Achshavin, you were trying to make juice, so now it is juice.
But hachaname kevan dachshavinu have mashke, right? Once you want to make, I like that. You want to make juice out of it, it becomes mashke. So if I want to squeeze rimonim, it becomes mashke. If I want to squeeze them for juice, it becomes mashke. So
Right. So you can't squeeze rimonim, not because of B'nai Menashe that they do it, but because anything, anytime, anywhere you squeeze something for their juice, so you're doing a malacha. And in the Beit Yosef, he brings the Hagaot Smak and the Rabbeinu Yerucham, who hold taka like this, that anytime you squeeze a juice, any vegetable, doesn't matter what it is, if you're trying to squeeze it for juice, forbidden. Because you see here, achshavinu, you wanted it, you got it. So it's also, you were trying to make juice, you made juice. That's the opinion of, we're not going to paskin like that, but that's the opinion of the Hagaot Smak and the Rabbeinu Yerucham, based on this Gemara.
And seemingly the Tosfot as well.
Yeah, I think he also quotes the Tosfot. There's a limit to how much I can remember, but yeah, Tosfot also. Yes. Go ahead. So now let's bring Rav Papa.
Rav Papa Amar Mishum Dahave Davar She'eno Simim Min Mikveh Lechatchila. I think it's supposed to be V'chol Davar. The bet there looks extra here. V'chol Davar She'eno Simim Min Mikveh Lechatchila Posel to Mikveh B'Shinui Mareh. Right, just because we don't make a mikveh out of tradin juice, and anything that is not something you lechatchila would make a mikveh out of would be posel the mikveh by changing the.
Wait. What does Rav Papa say? Da'amar mishum da'have davar she'eino si mimenu mikveh lechatchila v'kol davar she'eino si mimenu mikveh lechatchila posel et mikveh b'shinui mareh. He's saying like this: it's not a mashke. It is not a mashke, but it is something that you can't make a mikveh out of. For example, you can't jump into a mikveh full of like powdered dye, like powdery. Like if you fill the mikveh with powdered dye, it's not water. You can't. Doesn't make a mikveh. So if I take powdered dye, which is not a mashke, and I throw it into a mikveh, it puzzles the mikveh, even though it's not a mashke. In other words, the first opinion was saying it has to be a mashke in order for it to puzzle a mikveh. And then Rav Papa saying, no, it doesn't have to be a mashke. It can be anything that you do admit it's not kosher for a mikveh, will be postal the mikveh. And therefore, this is not a mashke. You see what he's saying? I'm really sharpening what the point, I'm emphasizing what the point of Rav Papa is. He's saying it's not a mashke. And therefore, you didn't make a mashke, really? It's not usher because it's a mashke. You call it a mashke. It's not halachically a mashke. But it's possible anyway because it's something that you can't make a mikveh out of. So according to Rav Papa, how would he differ from Rav Chisda in the din in the din let's say of squeezing an apple, not an apple, a quince or some fruit that is not,
He thinks batla dato etzel kol adam applies to it. Even if you wanted it for mashkin, if the average person doesn't, I don't know about the average person, let's say something like that, doesn't.
You might be right. It even seems like Rav Papa is holding that by rimonim, it would be mutter to squeeze it.
Mm-hmm. So
if you're holding shar, it's sharp. But even if we don't go that far, we just say the third category for sure. But according to the Rav Chisda, it would be any vegetable or any fruit. Now look at this Rashi here. Joel, you read enough. Here, I'll read.
I could keep going if you want, but that's fine.
I'll read a little bit. Mistabra betutim v'rimonim pligi. So this is way back before. That was just talking about the rabbis agree with Rabbi Yehuda, I think it was. The ikka debau lahu mashkin Hilchach mash. In other words, these rimonim do make. Some people do make a mashkin from it. Hilchach mashve lehu rabbanan kezeitim va'anavim. So therefore, the rabbis equated it with zeitim va'anavim. So that's like a rabbinic gezerah to make them like zeitim va'anavim. Rabbi Yehuda pligi alayhu. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't agree. Aval shar pirot leka debai lehu mashkin. Nobody tries to make. There aren't those who want it for the purpose of mashkin, and therefore they didn't go there on that. So we're getting in these three categories. There's the deraita of these two vegetables, of anavim and zaitim, and then there's other things that the rabbis equated because why? Because people want that thing. Therefore, they want juices from it. And then there's things that people don't want juices from it, like Josie said, nobody wants to drink eggplant juice. At least I hope not. So those things you could have. I mean, the question is, what about lemon? See, lemon, what would you say about lemon? In point of fact, you could say like this. This is the way I want to say this, because the rosh is makel by lemons. And why? Because nobody wants to drink lemons. Who drinks lemon juice? You dilute it. You don't drink lemon juice. Nobody drinks lemon juice. It's too strong. So it's, even though you squeeze it, it's not for the purpose of it as a juice. Anyway, now Rav Chisda. So it says Rav Chisda. I think it's an important Rashi. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought it. Rav Chisda. Afal gav de la alma lo hashiv kevan. In other words, even though in the world nobody considers rimonim to be a juice worth juicing, kevan de echshiv ihu, since he does want it, have mashke, it becomes for him a mashke. Ba'achi mefarish Rav Nachman lebraita deleel tochatim pikain or figain uprishin. Those ones we could, but wait a second. If we just said that anything you want the juice for is forbidden, then how could you squeeze anything? Even pikain and prishim should be forbidden. So what does Rashi say? He has to explain that as being. This is Rav Nachman has to explain it, that you're squeezing it lemateka pri, below the tzarech mashke. You weren't trying to make the juice; you were just trying to squeeze it to get the juice out, so you could eat it. I don't know. You wanted to eat lemon peels, so you squeeze in the lemon to get rid of the lemon. You want to eat the other part, or you wanted to get the pickle juice out of the pickle. Avaloba rimonim, but not rimonim. You can't do. Even if you're trying to claim that you're trying to squeeze the rimonim I just want to I want to eat the seeds. I don't know. You can't. That's not a valid claim, because since so many people do want the juice, there's a gezerah. Dishel beit menashya hayu sochatin bechol etzarek mashke hilchak b'Shabbat asur afilu l'matek, even if you're just trying to sweeten. Since there's one person in the world that does it, it's very strange. There is someone who does it for mashke, therefore you can't. And it's not because they're the majority. If we let you, we're worried. The reason that we forbid is because we're worried that if we let you squeeze it for just improving the fruit, you might next time do it for, or this time do it for the juice. And since he wants the juice, have a mashke, and therefore it becomes a mashke, umechayet. Look at this. I underline this word mechayev, because here you see clearly that he's not holding like the Rambam, that you're only chayev chatat, right? Chayev means that you're chayev from the Torah. You're only chayev chatat. He's saying you're even here, you're chayev chatat. And there are those who want to learn from Rashi that anytime you squeeze a vegetable or fruit for the juice, you're chayev chatat. Avopikain, but with these other vegetables or fruits, leka the mechash, you don't have to worry. The ein adam oseh oto lamashke. There's no person in the world who makes eggplant juice. So this is Rav Chisda's opinion. Notice that anybody who wants to learn from this Rashi, what's the flaw in that? What's the flaw in that attempt? In other words, learn the halacha from this Rashi. This Rashi is just according to Shittat Rav Chisda.
Yeah, it seems to be entirely dependent upon that person's perspective, though. It's like whatever it is I'm trying to do at this, my intent at this moment is whether it's forbidden or permitted.
Yeah, well, that's exactly. But you're right. That's sort of problematic because, like, how are we going to know? It depends on what he's thinking. But there's another problem, which is that this is just Rashi explaining Rav Chisda. Who says it's Rashi's actual psak? He's just explaining Rav Chisda. We had another opinion, which is Rav Papa. We have Rav Papa who says he doesn't hold by all of this. According to Rav Papa, this is what the Beit Yosef gets into. According to Rav Papa, so when it said squeezing is forbidden, squeezing is permitted, it didn't mean squeezing to take it for free. It meant squeezing. You're allowed to squeeze vegetable fruits that are not normally made juice from. Okay. So here's Rav Papa. Rav Papa, taima de tardin lav mishum de chashivuta de achshavin hu. The reason that the tradin forbids the mikveh is not because it's important. The leolam lav mashkein, and it's never became a mashke just because he squeezed it. V'had de mafsel mishum. Have the mafsil mishum the kol davar she'ein osim mimenu mikveh. She'ein, what it means? What does he mean by that? That it's not water, snow, or ice. Posel at the mikveh b'shinui mare. So that's why it's forbidden. All right. So wait a second. So what do we have so far? We have so far basically that according to Rav Chisda, any fruit that you wanted to squeeze would be forbidden, and according to Rav Papa, no, you could squeeze fruits for their juice in certain ways, certain fruits for their juice, as long as it's unusual, then you could squeeze it for their juice, which would mean even into a cup to drink it, as long as it's unusual. That would be Rav Papa. And Rav Chisda would say, no, but once you want to drink it, then it's forbidden. And it'd be forbidden d'oraita, because that seems to be. Okay, let's go on here. Oh, this Gemara. I think we'll probably skip this. I gave you this at the last minute, this Gemara in Daf Tzadi Bet, where he brings a case. Basically, the Gemara brings a case. Anshe, I won't skip it. I'll explain it. Anshe hutzal ruba da'alma. They said, in other words, they say like this: you can't if you carry. I'm a rav mishum Rabbi Chia hamotzi mesoy b'Shabbat al rosho chayav chatat sheken anshe hutzal osim ken. You can't if you're chayav if you carry something on your head on Shabbat, you're chayav. And then they ask this question: but are they the majority? Most people don't carry things on their head. And if you're doing something in a meshuna way, in an unusual way, you wouldn't be chayav. If you carry, your key in your shoe, maybe you're patur. It's asur, but you're patur because it's an unusual way to carry it. Everything the Mishnah goes through, like how you supposed to carry things. Ela itmar haki itmar. Amar Rav mishum Rav Chia echad mibnei hutzal shehotzi masoy al rosho b'Shabbat chayav. If you're from the town of Hutzal and you do that, then you're chayav. Sheken b'nei Iro osin ken, because his people in his town do that. Oh no, that's a chayav. Now the Gemara asks, "V'tibatel dato etzel kol adam." But what do we care? Let it be batel, because most people don't do that. Eli itmar hachi itmar hamotzi masoy al rosho patur. No, in fact, you don't. Even in his own town, the fact that people in that town carry things on their head is irrelevant. It's patur. It's asur, but it's patur. V'im tim salomar anshe hutzal osin ken. But we say, wait a second, people do that. Batel datan etzel kol adam. It's irrelevant. So why was the Gemara so interested in Beit Menashe? Why didn't we say it's batel dat? I mean, we did sort of say batel dato, but we said for a different reason.
Well, but I think also, right, wasn't it because Menashe is a single person versus Atrahu, right? It's like this is a place, right? Just like Arabia.
Right, it's a place. In other words, we said it's not a place, and this is a place. Very good. So look at this Tosfot. This Tosfot is over there inside Ibet, but he brings our Gemara. He says, and this is actually going to give us a very important principle. This Tosfot. And this is the quote from the Gemara. And if you say people in this town do it, you say no, batel, their opinion is irrelevant. Mashma da al atra nami amar de batel datan. So you see, for just like Joel said, that if it's an atra, it's a place, you could even be batel. But why do we say that the kotzim, that the thorns in Aravia, you're chayav? In other words, they're kadesh. You can't eat them because some people do it in some place. Here we have a place, and we're saying, why do we say batel dat? The Kemberesh call Ma'arivin. He brings another place, Parik, ubebaval have ruba da alma vatanya v'chulei. The Ken batar hachi parik parsi have ruba da alma. So he brings other cases where there's like rov the olam, and it's places. Bekashe. The beperach havit. That's our Gemara. Gabe shel Beit Menashe. Hayu sochetim b'rimonim. They would be squeezing these rimonim. Uparich Beit Menashe have ruba da alma. And we asked there in our Gemara, well, are they the majority? Why do we care? Umeshane, and we answer, yeah, even though they're a small group, we do care about them, even though he's one person, we care about him. Dahatnan hamakayim kotzi b'kramim, and then we tried to bring a proof because of you see that people, even though they're a minority, we go and we say that the kotzim are forbidden. Sheken ba'aravi mekayim kotzi l'gamalehem. And we answer as a parik midami Aravia atrahu. So what am I pitom? Aravia is a place. But wait a second, in our case, it is a place. So it should, in our case, so in other words, in the case in the carrying things on the head, it's a place. Why don't we forbid it? But that was the answer. So what is Tosfos' answer? It says, "V'yesh lomar dahatam chashuv minhag Aravia delekol olam nami im hayu lehem rov gemalim havu nami mikaime." In Aravia, the case of Aravia is not just that it was a place. There's another condition. There's two conditions. It's not just that it was a place. It was that it was a place. And the only reason that people didn't do it is because they didn't have camels. It would be all places people would be keeping thorns. Because if everybody had camels, then everybody would want thorns. The only reason that in Aravia, we don't care what they do in Aravia. Sorry. The only reason that in non-Aravia, we don't keep them is because we don't have camels. But if we would have camels, then thorns would be very valuable. So that shows that that keeping thorns is a reasonable mode of activity. Right? It's a normal thing to do. It's just that we don't need to do it because we don't have camels. So there's two things. One is that there's a place that they do it, and two is that it's a normal activity. And the only reason that we don't do it is because it's not sensible for us to do it. Aval Beit Menashe dechad gavra. But Beit Menashe, he's not an atra, he's one place. Wait, we weren't talking about Beit Menashe. Our real question was, what about this Gemara over here in Sadi Bet, where the carrying, it is a place. Right? Think about this. The carrying It is a place. So, but he says, but the Tosfos doesn't talk about that. He says, "Aval Beit Menashe dechad gavra batla daito, afal gavra kol haolam im hayu lahem rimonim harbe hayu sochatim." If everybody had so many rimonim as that guy does, who's a farmer of rimonim, so they would also make juice. But so Tosfos is missing a piece. It's like a piece
Well,
missing.
no, I think everybody has heads. Nobody
Exactly. That's exactly the point. That the point is you need two conditions. You need that the only reason you don't do it is because you can't or it's not sensible to do it. So by the case of the carrying, everybody could carry on their heads and they don't. So the fact that you have an atra is not enough. But by the case of the of Menashe, it's not an atra, even if people would have rimonim, they would make juice from it. But it doesn't have the other condition, it's atra. So you need two conditions. You need it to be a sensible thing to do if you would have the facilities for it, if you would have camels or you would have fruits, and you need to be atra. So in the two different cases, we had one of and not both of the conditions. So what do we learn from this? Can anybody think of an example of something today that has the two conditions? That has, first of all, we don't have it here, but in some other place, they do this thing. And if we would have, and they not only they do this other place, they make some kind of juice in some other place. And if we had as many fruits as they did, we would also make the juice. But we just don't happen to have that. So it's sensible what they're doing. So the example I was thinking, the one example is like pineapple juice. In let's say in Israel, pineapples are very expensive, or maybe in New York, pineapples are very expensive. Nobody would ever make pineapple juice. So you could say it's mishune. It's unusual. It's what the Rashba called here. I gave you a source here. The Rashba here he says the fisha eno ela kemafsi behen etzel bnei adam. You're mafsi the rimon. If someone says a beautiful rimon and you squeeze it into juice, they say it was like a $10, not rimon, sorry, $10 pineapple, and you ruined it just to get some juice. So that seems like you're mafsid. So you're not doing a malacha. But if I tell you that in Thailand they have so many pineapples that it's totally normal to squeeze pineapples. So now we have both conditions. We have a place called Thailand, and we have a behavior that they do. And the only reason that we don't do it is not like carrying things on our head. The only reason we don't do it, because it's not like we had as many pineapples as they do, but we just don't want to squeeze it, which would indicate that it's a silly thing to do. But the fact that we don't squeeze it is not because it's a silly thing to do. We don't squeeze it because they're expensive here. So it comes out, according to this Tosfot, that squeezing pineapples is going to be forbidden because of this one place, because in Thailand they squeeze them. And you can't say that pineapples are in the category of rimonim and not in the category of shar vegetables or shar fruits, of other fruits. The only thing that can be in the category of other fruits is something that nobody squeezes. So nowadays, almost everything would be in that category. All right.
To bring that back, though, are we talking about being allowed to squeeze it, or just back to our kind of specific application, being allowed to use it if it's naturally flowing?
This is it's an excellent question, because it gets.
We digressed a little.
We're drifting. We're a little bit drifting. What was the proof? The fact that you could squeeze any vegetable or fruit was the proof that the Rabbanim agreed that confusing. the fact that you could squeeze any vegetable at all meant that when the Rabbanim said in the Mishnah, let's go back to the Mishnah. What did they say? Ein sochetin et aperot lotzi min mashkin. Ve'im yatsa me'atzman asuri. That's what they said. We prove that that's not precise because we gave an example of pikain that you could squeeze. So,
But because we were trying to find a case for Rabbi Yehuda to actually, I thought it was because Rabbi Yehuda says hayotze mehen mutar im lo ochlim, but they wanted to know in what case of which fruits, and that led us down the road of specifically rimonim, and then rimonim led us
right, but the Gemara says that both that proof fits to both the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda. They both agree that you could squeeze char vegetables. You could squeeze pikain. Right. They both agree to that. And then
I thought they both agreed hayotze mehen mutar. Sorry, im lo ochlin hayotze mehen mutar.
No.
Oh, even to squeeze.
You could even squeeze. So it must be
okay
that they hold. So where is the machloket? The machloket is the Rabbanim hold that by rimonim, if it comes out by itself, you can't have it. So it would come out. You're right. Not only can you not squeeze the pineapples, but if the juice came out by itself, you couldn't have it. If you would have a pile of pineapples and juice would come out of it, you couldn't drink it. Because people
in the case of intention for ochlin.
Even though I brought them into my, even though I bought it to eat it, and now I see now it's oozing juices out, I can't collect those juices and drink them. Because some people squeeze these things. Where? In Thailand. So yes, it would be forbidden according to the Rabbanah. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, it would be permitted.
So according to Rabbi Yehuda, your intention overrules it only in that limited case.
Right, your intention, yeah, exactly.
But we do have a halacha that things that are never used for juice, you're allowed lechatchila to squeeze on Shabbos, even according to the Rabbanan. We kind of skipped that part.
Exactly.
But
exactly, we do have that halacha. Here, wait, and just to prove that point, let's one more line here. Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav Chia bar Ashe, Amar Rav, Sochet Adam Eshkol Shel Anavim L'tocha Kedera Avalo L'tocha Kara. This is another example. This is a separate. This if you go back to the title here, this is juice squeezed into foods. Where were we? 7. Yeah. Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Ashe, Sochet Adam Afilu Eshkol Shel Anavim, which is Doraita, L'toch Kedera, Avalo L'toch Kara, but not into an empty pot. V'dag v'tziro Afilu L'toch Kara. But if you squeeze a fish to get off the salty juice from it, then you could even get the juice into an empty pot. Why? Because that's like we saw about the mateket apri, to sweeten I'm just trying to improve the flavor of the fish. So that's what I have in the title above. Juice squeezed to improve the fruit, or in this case, the fish. So it comes out, if we summarize, that there's certain fruits that you never squeeze, you could squeeze them. There's a machloket if juice comes out of other fruits. Between the rabbi, right? There's a machloket if juice comes out. But nobody says really that you can squeeze a rimon or a pineapple. Unless it's into another food like we see here. And it seems like even grapes, although we're not going to allow that really. But certainly it seems like you could squeeze certainly rimonim into food, and that's where we get the lemon idea. Because a lemon is probably something, I mean, you could say that a lemon is even more lenient, like I said, because nobody drinks lemon juice. But at worst case, you'll say it's like a rimon, and then even then, I think you could squeeze it into a food, but not into a kara, not into an empty bowl. Here, by the way, you also see the Rashi kind of holding like this Seraita. Klomar, Asra Torah Malacha, V'drikat Zeitim V'anavim, Dafka squeezing grapes and olives. Who, Dahavya Malacha, Aval Shar, Drichot Lav or Chayvu. It's nobody normally squeezes other things. Ubahachi Lav Malachanin. Therefore, it's not a Malacha, but it's Meshune. It's still kind of weird that you can squeeze a fruit at all. Why? Remember we said that people say, according to Rashi, I said the Rabbeinu Yerucham holds and Tosfot and the Haggadah Smak hold that it's also deraita, and against them to anything. And it's kind of strange that why aren't they right? And that's what I brought this Chidushei Rashba. Joel.
I'm thinking, because right, so far we've been dealing with like mefarek, which is like dash, right? The question of is it count as dash? But I wonder why it's not deraita, but why nolad doesn't come up in these cases. It'll come up in other cases like with ice, but why is squeezing fruit not nolad? Like you're making a new substance that didn't exist before.
I think the argument is that like it was already fully in existence. Again, like you're separating the thing from the thing, but like again, it's not like, oh, this egg didn't exist in a way that was accessible. It didn't really exist in the world outside of a chicken, prior to X, versus like the liquid was always in the fruit. It's just now it's in a different form.
As opposed to
that
making the ice into liquid. I guess so.
Right, but there's also a lot of people who think that that's fine. As in, like, there's a lot of folks who have the different views around like the ice and the melting, etc., because of those different arguments.
But in the end, the mechaber is going to paskin you're allowed to squeeze certain fruits, but you're not allowed to squeeze ice.
Right, I'm not talking about squeezing ice, but we have the thing about freezing and allowing things to melt, which is also something people talk about with nolad, which I think is honestly more comparable in some ways.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about mela. I'm talking about like you're not allowed to to squeeze ice because it makes, I guess because the whole thing turns into liquid versus it clearly is separating maybe for the fruit. But I don't know. I just throwing it out there as a
I think it's a good question. I think it's why is it you say that
the juice is there, but it's not exactly like juices in a can. You can keep on cutting through the fruit and never find the juice. You only find the juice when you squeeze it. So the squeezing creates something.
yeah.
Mhm.
In other words, not sure if it was there. Of course it's there, but it's not there in the same way that juice in a can is.
Well, especially think of an olive. An olive, there's no juice at all, and you squeeze it, and the juice comes out. I mean, you don't see any real juice. You squeeze it, and you get olive oil. Yeah, it's well. I think that you're teaching the next section about snow, so you'll answer your own question.
I hope I have an answer by then. That's
Okay. Let's take a break here, and we'll come back with the Beit Yosef. Okay. Max, you want to read for us Beit Yosef? Actually, let's start with the tour. I guess we should probably read the tour before we do anything else. So from the beginning, the tour.
Right. Zeisin va'anevim asor lasochtan v'im yatz'u me'atzman asurin va'afilu omdin la'achila delo havilan lamecha shema yischot afilu hachi kivan sheruban l'shsiya chayshinan shema yimlach alehem l'shsiya.
Okay, you don't have to translate. That's just
Yeah.
That's just summary of what we just saw. That Zaitim and Nanavim are special. And you can't drink even what came out of them on their own. But wait, what did he say?
Meaning even if those grapes, even if those
Right.
even if those
Even if
grapes
you wanted
are,
to eat them, even if you
Yeah.
wanted to eat them, whatever liquid came out, you can have. All right, go on, next one.
no, wait, you can't have.
Sorry, yeah, you can't have it. Anything that came out of the juice, anything that came out of the grapes, you can't have, even if you wanted them just for food, just for eating.
Yeah.
Because we're worried maybe you'll change your mind. Shema yimlo alehem l'shtia. You'll want to have them for drinking. Okay, read the next. Halacha.
The imnis rasku yafem erev Shabbos mutarin hamashkina yotzin mehen. But if you chop them up really finely before Shabbos, then whatever comes out is mutter.
Right, because basically it's mixing with, some of the juice came out before Shabbat and some came out after. So, or it's actually, I think a better explanation is we're less worried that you're going to, it's already been squeezed. So you can't squeeze what's already been squeezed. I think that's really what it is. All right, v'katav ba'ale truma.
Igis malea anavim sheboatin otam b'maklos inzo nisrasku v'asor hayayin hayotze mehem.
So right, it's not enough if you just have a big bucket and you hit it with a stick. You got to really chop them up. If you have a big bucket and hit it with a stick, you can't drink the wine. Ve'im yesh.
Ve'im yesh be'gigis yayin salul sheyotze me'erev Shabbos mutter shekol yayin v'yayin sheyotze b'Shabbos min hanavim mispatel b'yayin sheyatza me'erev Shabbos.
Right.
But if there's also just wine in the barrel before Shabbos, then whatever comes out, whatever the
is immediately batel.
Right,
in
whatever
the wine.
The chopped pieces, yeah.
We're gonna see in the Gemara in Yeridea, we'll see it's called kima batel, kima bima batle. It's as each part as it comes out, it just is batel into the other thing. Why isn't this a din of devar sheyesh la matirin? Because you could just wait till after Shabbat. Joel?
Because that's to be something that's nikar. Yeah, actually, that idea comes from here. Is like this is a challenge to this. So
exactly, because you could say, "Well, just wait till the Motzei Shabbat." No, we don't have to wait because we don't say Devar Sheyesh Matirin in a case where the thing is batel, only where the thing came into existence and then was batel. Here, it didn't come in. It's coming into existence was its bittul. Okay, umitam zeh.
Umitam zeh, nami mutar lishtos yayin min hachavish memali'in osa anavim shleimim, v'nosnin yayin alehem ula'achar zman misbakim v'yotze mehem yayin, af kishenisbaku b'Shabbos kol ma sheyotze mehem misbatel b'yayin sheyesh bo.
Right. So as if you fill the barrel up with grapes, you poured wine on it, and then the grapes, by their fermentation process, burst open and mix with the wine. You can also drink it, but it's the same principle. All right, go on.
Tutim v'rimonim asur l'sochtan v'im yatzu me'atman im omdin la'achila muter v'lo chayshinan shemayim la'achalayan l'shsiya kivan deruban la'achila omdin v'im omdin l'shsiya asurim chayshinan shemayizchot.
So from the beginning, translate.
All right. So with berries and pomegranates, you can't squeeze them lechatchila, but if something comes out, if their purpose was for food, then it's mutter, and we're not worried that you're going to change your mind, like in the grapes and the olives. But if it does happen to be that you are using those berries for their juice, then we're worried, and it's usher.
Right, and he says kevan de ruban la'achila omdim, because in the world we have this idea that most berries are set for eating. Okay.
Yeah.
V'shar kol haperot mutter. Yeah.
Keep going.
V'shar kol perot muter l'sachtan lechatchila. So whatever is not rimonim or in the category of rimonim, well, what's the category? Then you could even squeeze them lechatchila.
Yeah.
We didn't get much of a category here of what's the difference between shar perot and, right? We didn't get much of a definition of what differentiates shar perot from tutim and rimonim. Presumably, it's that it's not even ruban la'achila; it's all of them are la'achila. In other words, if it's rov la'achila but miut for juice, then that would be the category of rimonim, and anything that's not even a miut is what's mutter. Okay. So fine. So now I want to look at the Beit Yosef with that introduction, and we should start from Im Tomar. It's not exactly on my source sheet. It's a little bit before that. Wait, so basically, wait a second. Don't you pass like Rabbanan or Rabbi Yehuda?
Rabbi Yehuda.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So here, Max, keep reading in the Beit Yosef, where it says V'im Tomar the divrei aposkim shekatfu stam.
Sorry, I'm trying to find that.
By me, it's on the next page. And it has a dark letters, the Aleph Taf.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Everyone has it? Josie, you have it? Yeah, great.
Okay. V'im tamar u'ledivra poskim shekasvu stam teshar peros muter l'sachtan u'mashma
So who is that? Wait a second, let's stop for a minute. Who are those poskim? If you saw the Beit Yosef, you would know. Well, we said already. The Rif, the Rambam, the Rosh, and the Smak. All of them say shar perot mutar l'sachtan. You can squeeze, right? Not like the way we were trying to say that Rashi said that maybe any, right? Rav Chisda, what did Rav Chisda say? He says echshave. That's the word to know. Echshave. Once you consider it juice, then it's forbidden. So obviously the Rif, the Rambam, the Rosh, and the Smak don't hold like Rav Chisda. They hold like who? Well, he's going to explain. Mashma. Go ahead.
Umashma da'afil lahatsi mimehen nami share.
Right. Now you can just squeeze them, not just into food, but even not into food. Go ahead.
Heichis ratsu had okminan lahai de asur kid Rav Chisda. De'im kain kol adam shesochet shum pri lameimav alpha pisha in derech lesochto kivan de chashve
The achshave. The achshave, I would say.
De achshve havele mashke vas.
Right. That's what we just said. How do they explain what about Rav Chisda?
Yeah.
Rav Chisda said it's forbidden. V'yesh lomar.
V'yesh lomar de lo svirale de tamad Rav Chisda mishum de kivan de achshve havele mashke ela kida amar Rav Papa.
When it says lo svirale de taima, it means they don't adopt the opinion, the explanation of Rav Chisda. Ela kida amar Rav Papa. This is what I was trying to explain in the Gemara. Go ahead.
D'tama mishum dehavi davar she'ein osin mimenu mikvah lechatchila. B'kol davar she'ein osin mimenu mikvah lechatchila posel to mikvah b'shinui mara. Right, they're only accountable to Rav Papa, not to Rav Chisda.
And Rav Papa said that there was no source of achshave. There's no concept of achshave. There's no concept of achshave, and therefore you could squeeze other things. And the reason why it ruined the mikveh is not because it was shar perot achshave, but because of a different din. It's a din in mikveh that you have to use water or ice. By the way, in Russia, sometimes where they didn't have a mikveh, a woman could, you'd have to be quite serious, but you could jump into snow. or you could even pile snow on top of it.
I
No,
thought the Mechaber rules against that. He says only for Kalim. He says not for people. If I remember correctly.
maybe, but I think that okay.
Maybe I'm wrong. I have to double check.
Double check. I don't know.
Yeah.
Makes sense that you could, but anyway, ice bucket. Yeah, you could certainly jump into it.
It
They
did
do that.
just start snowing here as you said that, by the way.
It did what?
Just start snowing here as you said that. So
Really? It's still
Yeah.
snowing?
in Michigan in spring, yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, so go on. We have like 90-degree weather here sometimes. Anyway, go ahead. Uperish Rashi.
Upeish Rashi, Rav Papa Amar Tamid Tradin Lav Mishum Chashivuta De'achshavinhu De'achshavinhu Hu Uleolam Lav Mashkaninhu V'hada Mifsio Mishum De'kol Davar She'en Osim Mimenu Mikva V'chule.
In other words, the only reason that you're forbidden is because you can't, the mikveh can't be made, but don't tell me it's juice. It's not juice.
Yeah.
And that's how the Rambam learns. The cave, go on.
Right. V'kevan de lamai de Amar of Papa lo tzrichin le'apuke lishna de sochatin mi pashte hachi naktinan v'nireli hachi naktinan.
So he says like this, and he says, since Rav Papa, he says, actually Rav Papa is preferable, because according to Rav Papa, we can read it straight, that when it says sochatin, by the pikain, it means you can squeeze
That's what
it.
I mean.
That's what it means, according to the Pshat. We don't have to come to unusual. What's the other explanation? Anyone? What's the other explanation? Why can you squeeze pikain if you say that you can't make juice? If you don't remember, we're going to see it in a bit, Yosef. But if somebody wants to remind us, no. Okay, so continue a little bit more, and then I'll ask Ori to read. Go ahead.
Venerally, degam l'Rashi v'Tosfos yesh lo markin dema de pirshu de sochatin lav lohotzim mimen kamru el lemetakapri. That's what it is.
So what does he say?
Right. It's right. It's not about getting the water out. It's about improving the fruit. Making the fruit better, sweetening.
In other words, when it said the pikain you could squeeze, it's talking about to improve the fruit. But no, he's now going to say that that's Ella Hainu. You got to read on Hainu. You have to keep reading.
Hainu lamai. Hainu lamai
de salkadaitcha.
Oh, I have my my version online here is
missing.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
It said desal. Okay. It's probably just a few things. Okay. Desal kadaitach de tama de wow. There's the tama de Rav Chisda. The tama de Rav Chisda mishum de chashve.
In other words, here's what he's saying. Here's what I love actually, which is that he's saying the Rashi is only on the Salchadaika, the time of the Rav Chisda Mishum de Keva de Achshave. That's only according to that. When Rashi said it was forbidden and that the juicing was for making it sweet, that's only if you hold like Rav Chisda. Rashi wasn't paskening. The Achshave havale mashke avalamai the asik Rav Papa. But what Rav Papa concludes, Kevan de Matzinu the Perushe Sochatin Kepashta Achinaktina. In other words, that's the way we go, because that's the simplest pshat. And just say that squeezing means squeezing. And Rashi, you can't actually prove one way or the other. He was just giving the explanation as the Gemara read. All right, so here, Ori. Now, so wait a second. So what do we got in the first part we just saw? We just basically saw that he's explaining very nicely how the Rambam and the Rosh and the Rif could be correct. That really you could squeeze fruits for their juice. And not just into other, and not strict, like perhaps Rashi and like the smak, like the Haggadah smak and the Tosfot and perhaps the Tosfot. I think Lexi, you're right, and I'm not sure if it's exactly clear in the Tosfot, because I think it's also the Tosfot according to.
I mean, there's a similar ambiguity as to whether they're just explaining their implicit position or paskening.
Exactly. Okay, so Ari, read from here. Ve'im taima.
Ve'im tamar kati Teikshi Menasya ben Menachem Havi Ruba da Alma
Question mark.
So if you want to ask from the case of Menashe ben Menachem that they would be considered, or would they be considered a rove? They would not be considered a rove, essentially. The Afshar Lamang de Shel Beit Menasya Lav Davka the Inchi Tuva Nami Havu Sachte Lahu B'chol. You could say that.
So what's his question?
It's not
What's
just
his question?
Beit Menasya, that a lot of people do that.
What's the question here? Ve'im toimar akati tikshe, and if you say we can still be perplexed, or we could ask a kasha, but wait a second, Menashe ben Menachem, this guy is not the majority of the world. And therefore what?
And then therefore you shouldn't prohibit rimonim based on that practice.
Right. You should be even able to squeeze rimonim, maybe. Not just, right? You should even be able to squeeze them.
But then he says that maybe a lot of people
seek. You have to read like that. When it said Beit Menashe, it didn't mean just that one guy. Why? Right. What did it actually mean? The inshe tuva nami havu sachte lehu b'chol. Many people made the squeeze these things. The Gemara didn't mean that. The Gemara didn't mean just him. Ella, go ahead.
Ella denakat chad minayu. They were just giving an example of one of the people who do this practice, but it could be a more global practice. The chashivuta de rabim havia chashivuta. And then when we say chashivuta,
no, the significance of many is halachic significance.
Right.
In other words, the chashivuta, the importance of many, we do havia chashivuta. That is considered important.
As opposed to like one person considering it.
There's one person is not, in other words, one person is not enough to make it forbidden. But a few people is enough.
Even if it's not the rove of the whole community, right? Even just a group of people would do that with rimonim. So it could be considered,
even though they're not the majority of the world, even though they're not more people that do it than don't, it's still a done thing. Afalgav the lav ruba the almaninhu kedamrin and sham b'gemara like the case of the Arab kotzim.
Mekayminim kotzim midei irei arba atrahacha batla da'ato etzel kol adam. Right. So since that's the common practice, that's the assumption on even every person's intention.
Right. So basically, the Beit Yosef here is bringing a bit of a chiddush here, which the Taz, we're not going to have time to see it, but the Taz is not like. Taz says, "Mapitom, you're making a chiddush that the Gemara didn't mechadesh," but he's saying here a chiddush that as long as there are a significant, the Gemara when it said Beit Menashe meant anytime you have a significant number of people that do something anywhere in the world, then it would mean that you would be in the category of rimonim and tutim. That's the point. In other words, he's expanding rimonim and tutim. It's not, this is where we see the expansion of Rimonim and Tutim. It's not just those two fruits, it's anything that is commonly, even in a unusual, even in not the majority of the world, but as long as people do it. So that would put like everything nowadays. Pretty much, not everything, but many fruits would be in that category because many things are made juices out of. Maybe not banana. What?
Is his intention to explain the intermediate status of Rimonim that we've already seen in the tour? Meaning why they're not completely allowed to be squeezed, but they still are allowed if it comes out on their own with the intention for ochel.
I don't know exactly what there's a drisha here on it. I didn't if you look, I'm not sure exactly what his intention is. If you look at the drisha in Aleph, he says Mitzarich Iyon ki ba bet Yosef l'shanot terutz hadash shelo muzkar b'Gemara b'divrei Rav Papa. In other words, he's saying like this. This is saying, even if you, Bet Yosef is saying like this, even if you hold like Rav Papa, who says what? Who says that the reason is because anything you put in a mikveh is no good. So therefore, you could really squeeze juices, but then you can't squeeze juices because of Beit Menashe, he's saying. Anyway, first of all, the Drisha is upset with the fact that he's trying to give a terrorist that the Gemara didn't give. I don't really want to get into it too much. I think the way I want you to understand is like this: the Beit Yosef is expanding the category. That's the way I understand it. He's expanding the category of Rimonim and Tutim to include anything that any significant number of people do.
Mm-hmm. But it's the same halacha that we have so far, that they're not, you can't squeeze them, but potentially what comes out of them.
No, but he's saying what's in that category. It's not just
right.
Tutim and Rimonim.
Like just to give an obvious example, I thought of like oranges.
Like oranges, exactly.
We eat them, but it's like common for juice also, and
exactly.
And
limon, but limonim. Well, the question is, can you squeeze them into fruit? That's also the question. Can you squeeze into food? Can you squeeze rimonim into a food? Perhaps not. So that would mean you couldn't squeeze oranges into your salad, but you could squeeze lemons into your salad. That's the way I'm understanding it. That you can't squeeze rimonim into your food. You can't squeeze tutim into your food, and you can't squeeze oranges into your food. But lemons, the Rosh says you can, and the reason that we can differentiate is what I was saying before, because nobody drinks lemon juice. But oranges my point is like this: just because you can squeeze a lemon into food doesn't mean you can squeeze an orange into food. That's what I'm saying. Okay, we'll read a little bit more.
He's saying it, yeah. Umashmali, the tutim b'rimonim lav dafka, ela hu hadin l'chol pri shederech l'sochto l'meimav. Okay, so he's saying it in Forash now, right? He's saying it's not just tutim and rimonim, not specifically tutim and rimonim. It's also the law for the things that you would, anything that is common to squeeze for its waters, its juice. She'asur l'sochto b'Shabbat. You can't squeeze it on Shabbat. L'cheini ma shekatav harosh, and you see that in the Rosh. V'zeh l'shono, v'sheshe'ilat al schita.
Sha'alta, I think it's a tshuva, I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's not a tshuva, but he says sha'alta. You asked al schitat limonish. You asked about squeezing lemons.
Nira shehem bichlal shar perot shemutar. Right, you would think they're in the general category of other fruit that should be allowed. Mutar sochtan she'en derech klal lischot limonish letzorech mashke, because that is not the general practice to squeeze lemons for a drink.
That's what I'm explaining. You see, I'm giving my explanation of this. I'm saying, what do you mean? What do you mean? We do drink it. We squeeze lemons for mixing with water and drinking. And that's what he's going to say they do in Egypt. But we don't drink the lemons as they are. Litzorach mashke itself. Ella litzorach ocha. We squeeze it to put into food in general. Umutter l'soch tam b'Shabbat ad kan l'shon harosh. Mashma she'im hayad derech l'soch tol litzorach mashke. If it would be the normal thing to drink it, hayah asur k'mot rimonim. Ba'al korcha tzarich lomar ken shaharei b'imei haTalmud hayu osim yayin mitapuchim. They used to make wine from apples. K'de'itya b'sof perek ein ma'amidin. Ve'im ken va'adai chamira mirimonim. And then it should be logically more strict than rimonim, because they made juices out of it. The lo have osin yayin mehen. They didn't make rimon juice, and yet we see that it's more mekel. The havu amri de Menashe ben Menachem batla date etzel kol adam. So you see they didn't do it because only this one person did it, or only a few people did it. Vafilu hachi lo his kiru tepuchim, and nevertheless they didn't mention tepuchim. So it must be that they didn't include it because rimonim is a general category and it was already included in it. In other words, tepuchim is like rimonim, and that's why they didn't mention it, because they should have mentioned it. Because why did they mention it? It's everybody knows in the Talmud they made wine out of apple juice, and that they didn't mention it. It's because they felt they already did mention it in rimonim, in rimonim and in tutim. Elavada kedamra de tutim rimonim lav dafka, but you must say it's not dafka. Velo, which is very, important halacha, because I would have thought maybe it is lav dafka. Velo od ella afilu im ruba da alma ein nogin lischot oto pri lemeimav. Even if most people don't. Im noda lanu she b'shum makom. Here you can underline this. Im noda lanu b'shum makom schotin oto lemeimav asur l'sochto. If anywhere in the world they do sochet, then it's asur l'sochto. Because you see clearly that they didn't squeeze rimonim. And even according to the one who said mapitom, why would you forbid it just because of Beit Menashe? He's only one guy. Lo akshe hachi elamishum dikeven deyechidahu. He only asked this question because he's an individual person. If there was a place where people generally did squeeze them, then he would have agreed that we should worry about that place. Just like we worry about the people in the Arab lands that feed their camels kotsim. So you see that it must be that there's a general category. Anytime that any people generally do squeeze it, then for you, even in your area, they don't, it'll be forbidden to drink even the juice that ooze, as you pointed out already, not just to squeeze it.
Is he using the Manasseh case in the inverse way that he used it before?
Exactly. Before he said that Menashe was many people, and now he's saying it's one person again. He's a little bit having his cake and eating it too. Yeah.
Or maybe that's the logic of that Gemara, that it's sort of put there. The question of that Gemara is this like a Rabbi or not? And they decide that it's not, but they were at least if I understand correctly, considering that it was maybe a slightly larger minhag.
Right.
That was the context, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what. Yeah, it seems to be a slight difficulty here. Maybe when before the Beis Yosef was just talking according to Rav Papa. Maybe now we're talking according to Rav Chisda. I'm not sure.
I think
it's a good question, but let's go on.
Lexi,
you got an answer?
I don't have a definitive answer for that, Kashia, but in some ways, this explanation feels almost similar to the tension that exists in the idea of like nevela she'eina raruya leger, right? When we're talking about like food that is like lifgam, like isser that's lifgam that you can eat, right? And there's the difference of like, if it's mixed in, it can just be a little bit lifgam. If it's in front of you, for it to be permissible, for it to not be forbidden, it has to be a thing that is not suitable to be eaten, right? So there's almost a slight paradox of it has to be a thing that is like generally inedible for
And then you can eat it.
for you to eat it. And so for this, it has to be something that like truly like nobody would think to squeeze the juice for you to be able to squeeze the juice. And then also in the funny way, once you do that, you've kind of, to the extent that it's made known to other people, you've now made that a forbidden thing for other people to squeeze because now you're a person who squeezes that juice. So it's a thing that people do.
Yeah, I don't think you can take him literally at his word when he says shum adam ba'olam. I think he just means it has to be, like he said before, a significant group. It can't just be one guy.
Right, but like Beit Manasseh is not an individual, but it's like, a small like house. It's a household, right? So it's not like literally just Manasseh, but it's this like subgroup of like not a huge number of people. So like say there's a bunch of like a small group of health nuts who decide that like potato juice is actually really good for you.
Right. Well, here's the example: wheatgrass juice. There are people who drink that, but I wouldn't say it's enough. It's still fairly uncommon, so I wouldn't say it's enough to be in that category. But yeah, it's difficult. It's a difficult question. Let's read a little bit more, and then we're going to go to the Shulchan Aruch. Umihu is here. Umihu hani mili kishederech b'nei hamakom hahu lisochto lishtot memav lasir tzama. That's only if they're trying to make juice to quench their thirst. O letanug, or for some other pleasure. Aval im, or to enjoy the drinking. Aval im ein darkam lisachto lemeimav ela lirefua, but only they're doing it for health reasons, like maybe wheatgrass. I don't think anybody is thirsty and says, "Give me a glass of wheatgrass juice." Nearly delo mitaser mishum hach. That wouldn't be enough of a reason. Deim lo king is if you wouldn't say that prishin. Prishin was prishin again. Chavushin. Prishin is like quince. Yeah, in modern Hebrew, chavushin. The Tanya, the sochetin. The Tanya, the sochetin uparish Rashi shehen kodonish v'ken limonish shehetira rosh v'ken rimonim lamanda akshe Menashe ben Menachem have rubada alma milo sachte luhu l'refua. In other words, you got to say, according to the one who was makshe on and said, well, I want to permit rimonim. Well, he must have all known that some doctors told you to drink rimon juice, and yet he must have felt that's not enough of a reason to forbid. Milo sakte lehu arofim lasot mehem mashkin. In other words, of course, doctors make all kinds of juices. Ella vaday kol she'en sochtin ella l'refua eino bichlal tuti rimonim. If just because some people squeeze it, doesn't put it into the category for medical reasons, doesn't put it into the category. So if you have a pile of wheatgrass and on Shabbat oozes from it some wheatgrass juice, you could drink that because there's not enough people that actually drink it, and certainly even the ones who do drink it don't drink it for anything but medical reasons.
If it oozed from it on Shabbos, then you could drink it. Like you could even, again, the whole point is if something oozed on Shabbos, we can even do that with rimonim. Right. The difference is that you could squeeze it on Shabbos. We were saying that with rimonim, with this whole category, everything but the grapes and olives, if it oozes on Shabbos, you're allowed to use it. It's only grapes and olives that you can't use the oozed stuff. It's that with these ones, it's only ever used.
No, that's the machloket. Well, let's look at the Shulchan Aruch. So it goes on. The Torah
is going to paskin. Like other than Rabbeinu Yerucham and maybe the Rashi, maybe Tosfot, but we don't know. And that one Hagahot Smak.
No, I believe that we're going to say the oozing of itself of a rimon is going to be forbidden. I believe. No. Okay.
In the Torah, it was already forbidden. It was only allowed if it's le'ochlin. So your intention comes into play with the oozing. in
Ah,
the
yeah, right.
category.
Okay.
So it's not any oozing. If I have it on hand for juicing, then it would still be not allowed.
Then I wouldn't be able to eat it. Exactly. So there you go. That's what I meant. Okay, so let's look at here, Ruben, would you like to read the Shulchan Aruch?
Yes, from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. Zitim
We gotta
v'anavim.
finally paskin here, you know.
Yeah. Zitim v'anavim asur l'sachtan. V'im yatzu me'atzman asurim afilu lo hayu omdim ela la'achila. V'tzutzim v'rimonim asur l'sachtan. V'im yatzu me'atzman im omdim la'achila mutar. V'im omdim l'mashkim asur. V'shar kol ha'perot mutar l'sachtan. Okay, so olives and grapes, you cannot squeeze lechatchila, and if some liquid seeps out on its own, you cannot make use of it, even if those fruits were designated for eating. And then when it comes to tutim and rimonim, you can squeeze them from the outset, but if some liquid from them seeps, if they were designated for eating, it's permitted to make use of the liquid. But if they were designated for mashkim, then you can't make use of the liquid. But the rest of all other peyrot, it's permitted to squeeze them from the outset.
Right. So, for example, well, wheatgrass not gonna ooze, but let's say you had you had pineapples, and you were having them in the house you cut up some pineapples before Shabbat, and you put them in a bowl, and now in the bowl you have, or you cut them on Shabbat, but I want to stick with before Shabbat, it doesn't really matter, but you cut them before Shabbat, a huge amount, and then you put them in a bowl, and now there's a lot of juice in the bowl. If you're planning on eating those pineapples, so then you can drink the juice, because they're like rimonim, but you can't squeeze pineapples on Shabbat for making juice. Okay.
But after all that, he didn't say the words kayotzebo.
You're right.
What he wrote in the Beit Yosef, he wrote tutim v'rimonim asur l'sachtan. He didn't broaden the category.
You got to know. You got to read the Beit Yosef. This is a point that I have been convinced of more and more often, that you cannot paskin even from the Shulchan. You read a sif in the Shulchan Aruch, you can't paskin anything. You have to read the whole Siman, and you have to probably even read the Beit Yosef, because you're right.
It does. The Ramah brings it though, in this case. But the Ramah brings it in this case now.
Oh, so yeah. So go ahead. So wait. So where were we? Ruben, keep reading.
Okay. Haga ubamakom shnagu lischot eze perot lishtot meimav machmat sama o ta'anog dino ketutim l'rimonim aval im nahagu lisochto l'refuah levad ein lachush v'kol ze davka lischot asur aval mutar limtzot piv mina anavim hamashke shebahen b'kol sheken b'shar dvarim v'yesh osrin limtzot b'peh me'anavim ukiyotze bahen. Okay, so he says that in places where the practice is to squeeze certain fruits for their juice to drink, or to like quench your thirst, or just because you enjoy it, they are considered like tutim and rimonim. So you can't do it from the outset, but you could make use of the seeping liquid.
What? There's a problem with this. What's the problem with this Ramah? Something you should have, basically what we learned, you should not like this Ramah.
Nor does the Magen Avraham for that reason.
Yeah, the Magen Avraham knows this point also. So what's the point? Somebody tell me outside. Or Joel, you tell me.
I think Ruben raised his hand. Ruben, did you?
Oh, Ruben, go ahead.
I was just gonna. I don't know if this is right, but you're doing it for mashke. You're doing it. You're doing it for the reason that it seems like the Shulchan Aruch says it's not allowed.
No, you're allowed.
Dino
ketutim. What is dino ketutim v'rimonim? Now the shar perot are like tutim v'rimonim. That's all he's saying. So the pineapple, you can't squeeze it. But if juice comes out and you're planning on eating it, then you could have the juice. But if you were planning on squeezing it and juice came out, you can't have the juice.
But
that's fine.
The makom is the problem, because the Beit Yosef ruled that if there is a place that makes this for juice, then in any other place you can't make it for juice.
Yeah, exactly. Why did he say bimakom shenagu? It sounds like lischot. It sounds like in Thailand, pineapples are treated like rimonim, but in Israel, they're treated like shar. I could actually squeeze them. Sounds like only in a makom shenogim lischot. Why does it makom? So look, if you look in the Magen Avraham, he says, I don't know if he really answers the question. I read through it just really. I read through it, it's quite long. I didn't quite get the answer, but he says that the question is l'chora tzarich iyun deharav Beit Yosef katav im noda lanu shebeshum makom in any place sochtim pri echad asur l'sachtan.
He does give an answer. If you continue, he basically he explains how this is in contradiction to the Beit Yosef, but then he thinks the Beit Yosef is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he says at one point, Torah Moshe Emet for Torah Moshe Emet. So he says the Ramah is right. Oh, he says that you think the Beit Yosef is wrong? Where does he say that?
He says,
yeah.
right after that, V'divrei harav Beit Yosef tmuin.
Why? Why are they wrong?
His like that whole diuk, the notion that it would be if any makom does this, like we would have to worry about it, is according to Rabbi Eliezer, and we don't hold like Rabbi Eliezer, we hold like the Chachamim, right?
But we don't. How can you say that? Don't wait. Well, who's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion? What did Rabbi Eliezer say?
That's the Karen case.
He was the one about the Kotzim, and we say that later on, whatever, Dafka ba'oto makom shmekayim kotzim asor lekayman v'shar mekomot shari. So we hold like the Rabbanan that only if you're in a place where it's the practice lekayim kotzim do they affect the kerem. Otherwise, we don't. So we don't hold like Rabbi Eliezer, and so the notion that we would care if someone is doing it anywhere would only be true if we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer. And he's like, that is not how we paskin. So the Ramah is correct.
Wow. Everyone got that?
Yeah, the Gra says it out nicely too. He has this similar idea.
So that's a huge kula.
Yeah.
That's a huge kula, basically. So we're saying that you could squeeze pineapple in Israel, where people say they're too expensive, and people would look at you funny. What's the svara?
You could benefit from the oozing of them.
What?
You could benefit from their oozing.
Why not squeeze them? They're shar perot. They're not rimonim.
You can squeeze them lechatchila for juice.
That's the whole point. They're not rimonim. They would be not rimonim. You could squeeze them.
But I guess also part of my thought is how normative does it have to be be'oto makom? Because definitely you can get pineapple juice in Israel, right? It's not a common thing that you're going to find everywhere, but it is possible.
Mm-hmm.
It's not incredibly you definitely can find people who have pineapple juice.
Well, do they have pineapple juice, or do they just blend? Do they have they put pieces of pineapple in a blender and blend it up? Do they actually squeeze it and get the juice out of it?
I don't know. We can do a survey, but I feel like there's a decent chance that given the it's not considered such a bizarre type of juice, right? I think that it's
right.
Not the thing that most of the vendors, you have the juice vendors on the side of the street, they're not usually selling pineapple juice because that's not really economically such a benefit for them. But it's existent. So with the otomakom, even though that's a greater kula, how prevalent does something have to be?
Well, right. This is another question: is if it's traded, if I see it here because people buy canned, people import from Thailand canned pineapple juice. So does that make it all of a sudden become normally? But if you look at the lashon of the Ramah, he actually says makom shenagu lischot, not just to lishtot, lischot. But you're right. I mean, it's a Metzias question. What exactly is the Metzias? Do they make pineapple juice? Where do they make it?
It's been a long time. A good part of my life's in California, close to Hawaii's, next door. Pineapple juice wasn't a thing until the predecessor to the dole. First of all, pineapples weren't such a big thing. They were just really in Hawaii. But pineapple juice only became a big thing in the 1930s. They started manufacturing it, and they figured out a way of doing it, and people actually didn't, it was like a big selling job until it happened. So it was period that pineapple juice from pineapple was is dust.
Right. I remember my father, Alav Shalom, was a big fan of apricot nectar.
Yeah,
You get
yeah,
in a can, in like a, I don't know what it was, like a half a
right,
gallon or something like
right.
that.
It was
And he like,
low, yeah. Well,
you know,
different than the lemon juice because people. But as we know, lemon tree is very pretty, and the rest of the pasuk goes from there.
yes. Okay. Well, let's just finish a little bit. We got a couple minutes. Let's see what we can do here in the rest of the. So wait. I accept. I like very much the class's explanation that we hold like Rabbi Eliezer, and therefore, uh, only in a place like Aravia would the kotzim be forbidden, and therefore only in a place where they make a particular juice will it be forbidden. Okay.
And does
And
it
of course it has to be for.
same? I was going to ask if it comes back to the same question we were having on the Beit Yosef, the way they were reading Beit Menashe, right? That if it was only because he was reading that a little differently than, I guess, the Shakalatari of the Gemara continues. It sort of gets resolved as not a good example of a group of people, and therefore, I guess, right? Is this the same issue?
No, but I think the issue is that in your idea on the question of kilayim, they rule like the Chachamim and not like Rabbi Eliezer. And the way the Gra says it actually, and I think also maybe the Magen Avraham is that even though we don't follow, like if there is a custom somewhere in the world, we then all follow it. But then in the locality where they do that, then you still have to take that seriously.
The question is, how does Rav Avadia paskin? Because you could read the Ramaz saying only two Tivrim Monim and ignore the Beit Yosef, or you could take in which case the Beit Yosef, the Mechaber would be more Mekil than the Ramah, or you could take the Mechaber as being like the Beit Yosef, and therefore even more strict than the Ramah. It's unclear. Okay, but let's go on. V'kol ze dafka lischot asur aval mutar limtzos. Oh, we read that already. You can squeeze it into your mouth, and there are those that say you can't. And like, if you hold it, like, can you hold a grape and squeeze out the juice into your mouth? Okay. Can you suck it even? Right. Sucking is maybe more making. I read the next one. Zaytim va'anavim. Or actually, let's skip that. Here, read Dalit.
Okay. מותר לשחוט אכשול ענבים תוך קדרה שיש בה תבשיל כדי לתקן האוכל, דהווה משקה הבא לאוכל, וכאוכל דמי. אבל אם אין בה תבשיל אסור. So you can squeeze grapes into a pot that has food inside of it in order to make the food better, because it's like liquid entering a food. Liquid entering a food is considered ochel.
Right.
But
the famous expression, mashke bala ochel ka ochel dam.
Kochel dami. But if there's no food inside it, it's forbidden.
Right. Which is more lenient than we might have learned in the Beit Yosef. It seemed in the Beit Yosef a little bit like you could only do this with certain fruits. But he's saying even with anavim. Well, the Gemara explicitly says that. The Gemara says explicitly anavim, but it wasn't clear whether that's what takant. Right. Anyway, so anavim into food.
It's at machloket in the Gemara, though, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Between two late Amorim, and I can't remember who's on which side right now, but it's
Anyway, here he's saying you can squeeze anything into your salad. You could squeeze grape juice into your salad or orange juice into your salad. Salad being a dry thing.
Is there any relevance to it being an eshkol, other than the fact that that's the language the Gemara uses?
I think it's like a filu eshkol, like even if it's a lot. I think that's the way I understood the Gemara.
Okay.
That's the one, just my intuitive way of understanding it. Look at hay. Here, read hay also in 1 minute.
Okay. יש מי שאומר דהו הדין לבוסר שמותר לסוחתו לתוך האוכל, רבנו תם אוסר בבוסר, הואיל ואינו ראוי לאכילה. So there's an opinion that you can squeeze unripe fruit into
Right,
fruit.
unripe grapes in particular, because you
Unripe.
get like we like making getting a sour. You want to add sourness to your food, so you squeeze that. And why does Rabbeinu Tam forbid it?
Yeah, but Rabbeinu Tam forbids it because it's not. They're not edible. So it's not really ochel. The
No,
fruit
no.
are
The point is like this: you took something that was not ochel and you made ochel out of it. So it's like you. I don't know if it's nolad or really they say it's like dash. It's borer. It's like taking a good food out of a bad food, although that should be permitted because good from the bad is permitted if it's immediate. So I'm not quite sure, but it's understood as being dash. The Beit Yosef calls it dash. In other words, you're pulling, or no, mefarik. He calls it mefarik, which is kind of dash.
Well,
But
you
it's basically that idea of pulling the food out of the non-food. But I don't understand. I don't personally. I didn't understand it because borer is permitted if you want to take the good out of it.
Look at the Taz on that, right?
The Taz asked my question.
He says, "Mimela hu kibor ochel mitoch psolet, ken katav atur b'shem Rabbeinu Tam, v'im ken im rotzeh le'echol le'alter oto davar shesochet le'tova b'aser mutar." It's like it must be talking about not for immediate use. So it's
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Taz and Mr. Goldstein. Okay, Yishar Koyach to everybody. Next week we are going to be in Pesach and Pesach break. But the week after that, Joel will pick up on the second half of the Siman, which deals
Won't the week
with.
after that also be Pesach for us?
Oh, will it?
Tuesday?
Israel.
No, wait, it's only
No,
Sunday.
it's Shabbos Sunday, isn't it? Yeah, Shabbos Sunday.
No rest. No rest.
So yeah.
I'm only giving you 1 week off, and ourselves. Yeah. So Joel will be talking about the other kind of squeezing, which is
very appropriate for where I live. So that's
yeah. If your clothes get wet on Shabbat,
we'll do. Well, I was thinking ice and snow, but we'll also do clothes and sponges and all that good stuff. So I'll send out some sources.
yeah, I want to hear a good heter on sponges.
Yeah, sponges in particular, we'll talk about, I think. But
Snowball fights.
and snow, exactly. Yes. So.